Yo, all right. So yeah, all right. So we're live. This is Jay Myrex. Thank y'all for joining me again, keeping the conversation going. Um, last week we were talking about Ableton Live 9.5 and the push, and you know, we really had a good conversation going about it. And I like, on my channel, I like to talk about music equipment and tools and things that help us to improve, and just also just things that help us to be more creative. And I think that equipment can be influential in the creative process, and it can create different opportunities, different workflows, different sound quality or sound possibilities are allowed or allotted to producers when they start to use different types of tools and equipment. So that's why I like to address things like the whole Ableton Live 9.5 and Push and all the other things that are music production related. So, this week I wanted to talk about something that happened on social media, on Facebook. One of my buddies, one of my good buddies, EA Ski, who is a multi-platinum music producer, made a cool post that was about investing in yourself as an artist. So his post had different pictures of equipment that is in his current studio. It had like MPC 3000s and Apogee ensembles and Portico Neve preamps and Neumann U87 microphones and different keyboards and computers that he has in his setup. And with each of those different pieces of equipment, there was a price tag, like a list price that he paid for it. And he's talking about prices that he paid at the time that those things came out, because in most of the cases he bought those things when they came out, when they were brand new, when they were going to give him some type of competitive edge in his music production, or give him some new abilities that he didn't have before. So he was talking about how he's invested in his music and his music production capabilities. So as an artist, you should never feel entitled to getting free beats from him, because music production costs. So as an artist, if you respect yourself and you respect the craft and you understand that music is a business, then you should also respect that as a music producer, we have overhead and costs, and you should be willing to invest in a business and support businesses that provide a great service, because great quality usually comes with a price. And this particular post was interesting because you had so many producers that were complicit with this. They were supporting this idea completely. It was kind of like the thing that every music producer that I know, at least, would agree with, because it's a big problem now that people expect free beats from music producers. And I think that just as a music producer, especially being in the game for 10 years plus, you know that it costs money to make music, not just to make beats, but to make productions. And that there's a difference between beat making and music production. And I want to talk about that a little bit. And also just want to talk about another thing that I caught from this whole conversation. Um, so first of all, a lot of music producers that saw it were complicit with this whole idea that music production is not free. But then you had some people that were defensive about this whole thing. They were like looking at the prices of the equipment and saying things like, who needs all that equipment, and that stuff is overpriced, and you don't need all that equipment to make beats. And it turned into a whole different thing. It turned into a lot of music producers trying to defend the idea of not maybe owning equipment or not owning expensive equipment. And I at first I couldn't understand why. I was like, here EA Ski is making a post about how producers should get paid when they do a good job and when they actually provide a great service as music producers, right? So that should be a positive for a music producer. Most music producers that are trying to make a living off of this shit appreciate that post and really respect what he's saying. But you had this very defensive spirit come out with people. And it's something I've been noticing online in general, not just on Facebook, but also on YouTube. I've noticed that, I watch different videos, different music production channels. And I've noticed when there's producers in the studio, whether it's like a rhythm roulette or one of the Fact TV 10-minute beat things or whatever, or whatever the challenge may be or production objective may be, when the producers are in the studio and they have a collection of equipment, they've accumulated different pieces of equipment, I've noticed that the comments can be very negative when they see a producer that has equipment that they may not have for whatever reason. Maybe because they can't afford it, or because they don't even know about the equipment or understand the value of that equipment. But I've seen this negative spirit where people are like, all that gear, and you don't need all that gear. And it's a very envious spirit, I feel like, because you have people that have come into this new paradigm of music production where they don't have to invest in expensive equipment to get started. And it's very different from like when I started. When I started, you had to invest in some type of tangible hardware equipment to start making music. You weren't going to just be able to download an MPC 2000 or a Triton keyboard. You weren't going to be able to download that stuff. You had to go and invest money in that. And when I started, I invested, several thousands of dollars in equipment so that I can get started. And I didn't even know everything that I needed. I just knew a couple pieces. I knew I needed to have the MPC, and I knew I needed to have the Triton, or at least I wanted the Triton, because I knew that that's what was being used at the time for a lot of the records that were actually making noise when I started, especially being a hip hop orientated producer. So I invested my money, and it was a risk, but it was a risk that I felt like was necessary if I wanted to be taking myself seriously and actually doing something with my music. And today, that's not a requirement. You can get started making beats, first of all, with a whole lot less, and it's a lot less expensive to a degree. I mean, we can talk about the cost because you do have to have a computer. I mean, if you want to do it where it's hassle-free, you want to have a decent computer, a fairly well-powered computer at this point, and then you want to have some choice software. But at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like you need as much to get started, because most of us have a computer. Most of us have some type of mobile device or something that we can download a music production or beat making software and start making beats with. So you have a lot of people that feel like now you don't need a whole bunch of expensive equipment to make a hot beat. And to a very strong degree, they're absolutely correct. You don't need a whole bunch of expensive equipment to make hot beats. You can make a hot beat on a phone. You can make a hot beat on an iPad. You can make a hot beat with Fruity Loops, whatever, GarageBand. You can make hot beats with very minimal equipment. And beats are just one aspect of music production. And I think a lot of people that get into this whole beat making paradigm don't know the difference between music production and beat making. You know, beat making, really beat making is something that is appropriated to certain genres of music. First of all, it's something that is relevant to, say, hip hop or R&B and certain types of electronic music, electronic dance music, and electronic music in general. Um, a lot of these people come from this beat making paradigm. They think about things from the world of beat making. Um, but there's a difference, because if you look outside of electronic music, right, there's plenty of music being made that has nothing to do with beat making. Beat making is essentially programming, it's sound programming. You're programming either using a step sequencer or some type of real-time live hardware sequencer, or you may even just be doing directly tape dumping, just recording directly to tape or recording directly to some DAW as audio. But essentially, that's sound programming. It's not the same thing as music production, because a lot of music, especially in genres like, you know, pop and rock and country and jazz and things that don't just focus around electronic sounds, you have to consider that there is a songwriting process. There are songwriters, there are music composers, there are arrangers, there are session musicians, there are mix engineers, there are mastering engineers. There are a lot of components of music production that cannot necessarily happen from the confines of just a computer program. And a music producer has the responsibility of not necessarily making a beat at all, really. You don't have to even make a beat to be a music producer. Your objective as a music producer is to facilitate the production or the creation of a song and see the song production process into its fruition, to from the genesis or the beginning to the end, where it's actually turned into whatever is, if it's going to be a record label or if you're turning it into a a distribution service or whatever. You're responsible as a music producer for the overall quality of the product, and you're responsible for the personnel that are required to create the production. You're responsible for making sure that people get paid, the songwriters, the musicians, the engineers. You're responsible for every aspect of the creation of the product that you're creating for a consumer. As a music producer, you're creating a product for a consumer to consume. So, as a music producer, there are expenses, there are costs. There are costs. You have to be willing to, first of all, invest if you understand that your vision for the product has certain standards and certain requirements. So as you write a song, as you may as a beat maker start off with a beat, and then you may get with a songwriter, rapper, or whatever, and start creating a song. And as you start creating a song, you may understand and listen to it and say, well, this song can now be better if we brought in a keyboard player, or if we hire a saxophone player, or we hire a guitar player to play over this song. And this song will actually be better if we had real strings instead of software strings or hardware keyboard strings. And as a music producer, you are responsible for the overall output. So it's your decision. It is your judgment call to make those decisions on whether you need to hire someone or you need to use some cheaper resource. And producers at the highest level are investing money. They're investing good money in making sure that they have the top musicians, top mix engineers, top conductors and arrangers, and all other personnel that's needed to establish the record and make it the best quality record possible. And I can give you an example of this. So, for example, if you listen to, say, Justin Timberlake music, stuff that's produced by Timberland. So, first of all, Timberland is a producer. We know him. He makes dope beats. You know, he's very talented at the way he puts together music and sound and rhythms. And, you know, he's very forward thinking. And he has a great vision for music. And when he produces for someone like Justin Timberlake, he knows that the consumer holds Justin Timberlake to a very high musical standard. And he holds himself to a high musical standard as a producer. So he invests in top of the line producers, engineers, and composers and arrangers to work with. So when you listen to a Timberland production, and then you might hear something that Timberland produced that has a string section on it, and the string section is sounding impeccable. It sounds nothing like what you can do from your keyboard or your computer. Why? Because Timberland has invested in a arranger and a live orchestra. So he may invest in somebody like Benjamin Wright. And if you don't know who Benjamin Wright is, do your homework on Benjamin Wright. Benjamin Wright has done string arrangements for people like Earth, Wind, and Fire, Michael Jackson. He's done string arrangements for some of the greatest out there, you know, Raphael Sadiq's and all kind of folks. He's done excellent work in the game. He's one of the best, and he has a very specific sound as a string arranger. So considering that now, Timberland has done his homework. He knows who's the best in the game for what he's trying to accomplish. And he's invested into Benjamin Wright. And he's paying Benjamin Wright and the musicians, the orchestra, or the session musicians that are playing on this record to bring the record to the next level of quality and musicianship. And this is an expense or overhead for Timberland as a music producer. He has to pay for the studio they're recording in. If he's recording musicians, most of these musicians are going to be union musicians. So they have a union rate. You know, so these are things that come into play when you start doing music production on a high professional competitive level. It's different from what you can do at home making beats. You can make beats and you can be happy with the beats you make, but if you really want to take your music to the next level, there's cost here. So, you know, if you've been doing this for a while, you start to understand what things are necessary to bring your music to the next level. You may know great musicians that you can hire for your production. You may know great studios that you can record at to get the sound that you have heard on different records, or the sound that you know is necessary for communicating your idea for your record. You may understand different pieces of equipment. You might understand, well, I'm going for more of a 70s or 60s tone, and I need, to use this type of microphone and this type of preamp and this type of compression, and I need to record to tape, and I need to have a facility that allows me to achieve that sound. So I'm going to invest in those tools, or I may want to be able to do it from my own studio, so I may invest in those things. And there's nothing wrong with that. As you become more experienced, you understand what's necessary, because you may not, from the beginning of your music production, understand all the things that you need. I know for me, I didn't know everything that I needed to make music. I knew a few things. And I think now a lot of music producers and beat makers getting into the game, they are convinced that because their DAW comes with so many great tools and instruments, that is all that they need to make any music ever. And it's a mentality that a lot of younger producers will fight you tooth and nail about, because there is this insecurity or envy, so to speak, about what they use, because they don't necessarily relate to being or having the money to afford different equipment, or they just feel like for whatever reason they don't need it because they don't know the value or what the sound potential or the sonic potential that you can get from certain equipment. So they will fight you tooth and nail. And what I experienced this week in posting or reposting EA Ski's picture on my social media is that a lot of people are very self-conscious and very protective over what they use to produce music. And the beat making tools that they use are justification for what price they don't charge. And I think that's the mentality a lot of these younger producers I'm seeing have, because they, when they see somebody that has invested into their studio, there's this kind of anger or envy or, sometimes downright hatred, because they see somebody with equipment and they feel like it's unnecessary because they don't have it in their studio, or somebody that they know that has done a major beat for an artist or whatever is able to do a lot with just a little bit of equipment, maybe a laptop and some plugins. So I'm not knocking any producer that feels like they want to stick to a minimal production environment. What I do have a problem with is those that don't respect, first of all, producers that have years of experience with sound, recording, and music production. Because those of us that have been doing it for more than 10 years have different experiences than maybe some of you that are just getting into it within the past 3-4 years that kind of were able to just get in with, very inexpensive equipment. A lot of us have been able to experience what is possible with different pieces of equipment. And because we now understand what tools are necessary, we can make better decisions when we're producing our records. We can choose this preamp for that sound, or we can choose this microphone with this type of vocalist, or we can choose this type of synthesizer when we're going for this type of sound. So it's different knowledge that you accumulate with experience. And as a younger producer, if you don't know or have that experience, don't feel intimidated just because someone else understands sound and has different experiences than you. Because you can learn things from people that have years of experience with recording, sound design, sound engineering. So don't be fooled, first of all, that you can do everything with just a computer. You can do a lot with the computer. Don't get me wrong. You can make great sounding stuff if you have patience and you have the right perspective and you have the right understanding of what you can and cannot achieve with your software. You can make great things happen. But at the same time, don't think for 1 second that just because you have software that replaces the need for any hardware, and that you can do all the same things with hardware, because you cannot. Now, you have to consider that even if you have hardware, that doesn't mean that your music is going to be competitive. If you have expensive gear, that doesn't mean your music is going to be competitive or good for that matter. And I would never tell someone that just because they buy the top of the line equipment and record in the top of the line studios that they're going to have a better quality. That's not the case at all. But if you know your stuff, you understand the possibilities. You understand what's necessary. And, a lot of beat makers confuse what's necessary from a beat making standpoint with what's necessary as far as being a music producer is concerned. So we need to expand our overall exposure to music, recording, sound, and really understand that there is more to music production than what kind of beat I can make, what kind of 808s I have, you know, how subby or, you know, knocking my kicks are. It's more to it than that. Because not all music is created from the perspective of those paradigms, cliches, and ideas. So, you know, keep in mind that if you do it long enough and you start venturing out into different aspects of music production, you'll learn that there are different types of tools out there. So don't be jealous, don't feel envious, don't get defensive. Be willing to learn. I always say that we should consistently be students of the game. There's always something to learn. There's always something new available that will help us to achieve different things in music and sound. So we should be open to learn from people and grow. And having a defensive attitude and arguing with people about what they need or what they don't need, if you don't know, if you haven't experienced it, it's pointless. You should really check that spirit, because a lot of times it comes from a place of insecurity, and you don't need to be insecure about your music or what you're trying to do. We all want to make great music, and you know there's different levels to it. Everybody's on a different level, so you can learn things from people, and you should be open to that. So, you know, that being said, um, I don't want to harp too much on the younger producers. This is not a session where I want to beat up younger producers. I don't want to beat up on people that do software-based production. I do plenty of software-based production. I'm fully aware of the capabilities of software. I use a lot of software. Software is very important to my music production. Hardware is important as well, because I know certain hardware allows me to achieve certain sounds, and that just came with experience and, you know, working as a music producer and sound designer. You know, I'm a sound designer by trade, and I also do music production by trade. So I understand that there are different tools that I can use to accomplish different things. So, you know, that being said, if any of you guys are looking for consultations about what you need to use in your production, what gear you need to use, how to use certain gear, how to use certain software, you know, I can help you out with that. If you want to reach out to me, you can go directly to my website. The link to my website is in the description, and you can sign up to do a one-on-one consultation. It's a paid consultation, but I can work with you. I do consultations over the internet and over the phone, and I also do them in person if you're local, if you're in the LA area. But I try to do a lot of my stuff online, so we can have a one-on-one session and we can talk and discuss, you know, sound design, sampling, mixing, engineering, music production, beat making, whatever you need help with. I'm here to help you guys. You know, I do a lot of tutorials online for free, just because I want to, you know, I want to give back. But if you need really like in-depth help with your music production, sound design, or anything else music production related, contact me on my website, altruwest.com. Again, the link is going to be in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. So, you know, that's pretty much it. You know, we also got the Altruwest, or the True West sweaters and the t-shirts available in the web store on my website. You know, link is in the description. So if you want to support that and represent the West, you know what I'm saying, like you can get that as well. So, you know, if you're new to my channel, check out some more of my videos. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's continue to build. All right? So until next time, I just want to tell y'all peace. God bless. Continue to seek wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing. So seek wisdom. Okay? So let's just keep getting it in. All right, y'all. Out.